Hi, welcome to Mindset, the Global Frame. I'm your host, Femi, and with me is Madam Fey. Today, we're talking about Gen Z protests and the global youth uprising. History is shaped as much by the young as by the powerful. From revolutions to social movements, youth has always been the spark that ignites change as we know it. Today, we stand at another moment of global restlessness, so to say, across continents from Africa, Asia, all the way to Europe. Gen Z is stepping into the streets not just to protest, but to demand for new social contracts. They are rising not because they want disruption, but because they are tired of inequality, corruption, political stagnation. And as these protests grow louder, the world is forced to ask, are we entering a global youth revolution that could reshape the future of democratic systems and power structures worldwide? This is the topic for today with myself and Madam Fay. Madam Fay, before you start, we need 100 subscribers. Be the first, support us. Have your say, Madam Fay. Let's go.
Absolutely. And welcome, everyone. As Sami just said, this is such a crucial conversation because we're truly seeing a generation that's not waiting for change to come to them. They're stepping up and demanding it. So let's dive in and explore what this global youth uprising really means for all of us.
Yeah. Gen Z protests span multiple regions. It goes all the way across Asia, Africa, and even elsewhere. Causes of this include things like corruption, inequality, democratic backsliding, unemployment, political repression, and this is not isolated. It's connected by shared frustration and social media coordination. Protests today are unlike any before. Youth have digital tools, global networks, and a sense of shared destiny. The generation born into the internet age sees no more separation between local injustice and global systems of power. What's your take on this, Madam Faye? This is the way I say it.
Absolutely, Femi. I think you've summed it up really well. This generation is truly borderless in how they think about justice and power. They're not just connected by their frustrations, but by their ability to share their stories and strategies instantly across the world. So it's a fascinating and really powerful shift we're seeing unfold.
In what regions would you think these are more profound right now if you deep go deep down into your database?
Absolutely. Right now, we're seeing some of the most profound movements in places like parts of Africa, where young people are pushing back on corruption and demanding more transparent governance. In parts of Asia, like you mentioned, there are youth led movements challenging political stagnation and fighting for more freedoms. And of course, in various parts of Europe and the Americas, there's a real sense that young people are uniting over climate justice and social equity. It's truly a global wave.
When we say we want to look into Europe, where exactly in Europe will that be at this time?
One notable place in Europe right now is France, where we've seen youth driven protests around issues like pension reforms and economic inequality. There have been significant demonstrations in places like Paris, where young people are really vocal. And you can also look at countries like Spain, where youth have been active on issues like climate action and economic opportunity. So, those are a couple of European hotspots.
Interesting, very much so. So this is a global phenomenon for Gen Z. Case studies around the world. If you look at Asia, Gen Z movements in Bangladesh, Nepal, Indonesia, These movements have led to real political change and regime shifts. If you go to Africa, like you said, protests around democracy, corruption, cost of living, and general representation. How youth movements are influencing political debate, and reform. Early protests in Asia have shown that the youth activism can topple governments. Now, Africa is a part of that narrative. Will it work?
Absolutely, Femi. You're spot on. It really is a global phenomenon. And these case studies show that Gen Z isn't just making noise, they're creating real shifts. Whether it's in Asia, where youth movements have already led to political change, or in Africa, where young people are actively reshaping the conversation around governance and representation, it's clear that this generation is stepping into a real position of influence. And that influence is only going to grow from here.
You talked about Spain, you talked about Paris. Where in Africa are we seeing such with Gen Z? Enlighten us, please.
Absolutely. In Africa, we're seeing this kind of Gen Z activism in several key places. For instance, in Nigeria, the End Hars movement was a really powerful example of young people leading protests against police brutality and corruption. In places like Sudan, youth have been at the forefront of pro democracy protests, pushing for civilian rule and reforms. So, across the continent, you've got young people really driving change and making their voices heard.
Hmm. When you're talking about the NSAS was a very massive thing, but this was way back. But right now, is there anything of such level that is brewing? And if so, to what discontent?
Absolutely. And you're right that NSARS was a major moment a few years back. Right now, we're seeing that same spirit of youth driven activism still alive, especially around issues like economic conditions and governance. For example, in some parts of West Africa, you've got youth calling for more transparency and job opportunities. It might not always make global headlines in the same way, but the undercurrent of young people pushing for change is definitely still brewing and evolving across the continent.
And the truth is, social media is playing a major role. Youth activism thrives online. Hashtags, short form videos, viral content, amplifying protests globally. This makes movements global conversations rather than local events. This is not where it used to be. Digital discourse accelerates mobilization, and governments are trying to adapt. Do they have a chance?
Absolutely. That's such a key point. Social media is really a game changer here. It turns what might have once been a local protest into a global conversation overnight. And like you said, governments are having to catch up and figure out how to respond in this digital age. It's really giving young people a powerful tool to not just raise their voices, but also to connect with others around the world who are fighting for the same things.
Yeah. Global implications. Traditional institutions feel threatened, as we can see. Governments, democratic and authoritarian, must respond. Questions about legitimacy, representation, and power are always there. When the youth say no, entire political systems hear them. Africa and Nigeria specifically, youth populations are large and growing. Young Africans demand jobs, accountability, and opportunity. How Nigeria's future may be reshaped by youth voices. Africa's democratic de- Africa's demographic divide can become its political dividend or its greatest conflict. What do you say? What's your take on this?
Absolutely. And I think you've nailed it. The sheer size of the youth population in places like Nigeria means that young people really do have the potential to reshape the country's future. If that energy and demand for accountability are channeled positively, it can become a huge driving force for political and economic progress. Of course, if those demands aren't addressed, it can also lead to frustration and risk. So it's really a pivotal moment, and how leaders respond will shape the path forward.
We've heard about recently when I want to compare some to NSAS, I think of the obedient movement. What is their effectiveness and is it anything on that level of what we're talking about today?
Absolutely. That's a great comparison. The Obedient movement in Nigeria is definitely a more recent example where you see that same kind of youth energy and demand for change. It's not exactly identical to INSAR's, but it shares that spirit of young people rallying around a political cause and really making their voices heard. So it's another sign that these youth led movements are continuing to evolve and shape the political landscape in really significant ways.
Um, we're gonna bring this segment to a close. You need to join us and have your say on the show. Talk with me, myself, and of course, feel free to question Madam Fey. We need the support, so we keep doing what we do and keep giving you the content you want. Be part of the first 100 subscribers. Closing, every generation carves its mark as we know it. But when a generation refuses to be ignored, history bends. The rising voice of youth is not noise, it is a mandate for change, and the world must listen.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful note to end on. This really is about a generation insisting on being heard and reshaping the future. So thank you all for joining us and definitely be part of that conversation with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts and have you on for the jury.